Recording.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, everybody, welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. And I'm very happy that we are rejoined. Our returning champion is Margaret Kimberley, who you all should know is the senior columnist at blackagendareport.com and also a member of the Black Alliance for Peace. She's fantastic journalist and an activist. And so, Margaret, thank you for coming back on One Plus One.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
It's an honor. It's a real honor to have you on. So, Margaret, because we're because we're strict for time. So I actually didn't write down any questions because when I was trying to prepare of what I wanted to talk to you about, I actually was completely lost as to what to talk about because there's so much to talk about.
There is.
There's so much to talk about, and you're so knowledgeable on all these issues. You're such a you really are like an activist that organizes protests, gets on the ground, and tries to build up the people power movement. So I actually really did not know what to talk about, but I think what I did want to talk to you about, three things I wanted to talk to you about is number one, could you give us an update on what's going on with the people power protest that's happening in the U.S.? Because a friend of mine was saying to me that even if the media is not really covering the Black Lives Matter protests and the protests against police brutality, there still is across the nation protests that are going on, and you're in New York where there still is lots of very brutal crackdown on the protests. So in general, in general, can you give us an update on what's going on with the what the movement for Black Lives, the protests against police brutality, and take it away from there.
They're still ongoing. Less frequently, smaller actions. Since the heyday, those first days back in June after killing of George Floyd, but it has not disappeared, and all of the conditions that caused it to take place have not gone away. There's still police murders. There's still, first of all, let me just say this: every day in the United States, the police kill an average of 3 people. So it's about 1,000 people a year. So there's nothing rare about police brutality. Excuse me.
Yeah.
But what happens is the media at certain moments will give attention. And they're in that moment now. So I think maybe it's a month ago now that a man he survived, but he's very seriously wounded, paralyzed. Jacob Blake in the city of Kenosha, Wisconsin, which is... it's near Chicago, I'll put it that way. One of those Midwestern cities that used to have living wage work and now doesn't, and was shot in the back 7 times. And there were protests after his shooting. Excuse me. So,
sorry to interrupt. And now, what was the police reason that they?
It's the usual thing, something simple that would, if they encountered a white person under the same circumstance, it would not have escalated into a shooting. Witnesses say he was trying to do the right thing, break up a fight. Someone called the police. People must learn in this country not to call the police. Nothing good ever comes from it. And during the confrontation, and he had his little kids in his car, the police shot him. And it's the sort of thing where none of this should have happened. Then in old footage from upstate New York, is it Rochester or Syracuse? Sorry, upstate New York, I'm forgetting, but a man was killed, died after an interaction with police. He was having a mental illness episode. He was smothered and died some days later. There's video of that. So there can be video every day. So the issue has not gone away. We also have reaction from the right. That's a new thing stirred up by Donald Trump. So in Portland, Oregon, we had, well, first let me go back to Kenosha. A teenager, 17-year-old white kid, joined with a militia group and showed up in Kenosha and killed 2 people and seriously injured a third. He's gotten praise from the president, who's already declared him innocent and said it was self-defense. I don't know how you can defend yourself when you're the only one with the firearm. So that took place. And in Portland, Oregon, where the Trump administration chose the show of force against a situation where there should not have been any escalation. There was another killing, pro-Trump person, someone from a right-wing group was killed. The suspect in the case was later, last week, was killed by the police. They can't get their story straight. Essentially, he was executed. And Trump praised the police for executing him and said there has to be retribution. So that's
because he was an Antifa terrorist, right?
Well, yeah, that's what they're calling him. And this man, he unfortunately talked to the media instead of getting legal advice. He pretty much confessed to a reporter a few hours before. It was very, very unfortunate. And so that's one of the things that has changed, the dynamic we're now seeing, this pushback from the right wing. And people have died, and almost all the victims have been victims of the right wing. That case in Portland was unusual in that respect. There was a demonstration in Times Square last week here in New York City, and someone drove their car into the crowd, and the driver still has not been arrested. So we have the police taking sides with unquestioning. It's not open to question. The police they're doing what the police do, and they're siding with these people who are violent, who threaten to kill people, who actually have killed people. In Kenosha, Wisconsin, there was supposed to be a curfew, but when the police saw the 17-year-old shooter, they said, "We're glad to see you," and gave him a bottle of water. After he shot those people, bystanders pointed to the police and tried to tell them he killed somebody, but they didn't care. They just rolled right past. So that is a new dynamic where people are actually dying. And the violence is almost all on one side. And Trump he has really ratcheted up as he always does, the anxiety level, always talking about Antifa. And if I just want to talk about Antifa for a moment, there's no group called Antifa. It's more of a concept about fighting fascism. So any black person who protests is said to be from Black Lives Matter. Any white person protesting is supposed to be Antifa, with the media being lazy. So people act as though there's a group called Antifa, or somebody has the word Antifa on their letterhead, or if you go to an office, somebody has the word Antifa on the door, and there's no such thing. So right now we're going through these, there are these terrible wildfires along the west coast of the United States, in Oregon, in California, there are people who think Antifa are committing arson. So there's a young couple, they were photographers, and the young lady was, the fires were affecting her hometown, and they decided to go and take pictures, only to discover they were being tracked by the police and accused of being Antifa arsonists. So we see in this country right now, everything wrong is coming to a head. The COVID-19 pandemic has left people destitute, businesses shut down. Unlike in other countries, my understanding is in Europe, the government gave help to subsidize people's wages, subsidize businesses. None of that has happened. So businesses have just gone under. People are just out of work. We have an unemployment system where there are people who have gone months without getting their the unemployment benefits that they've earned. People are being evicted from their homes. And the disease has really not been conquered as it has, let's say, in China, where only 5,000 people died, as opposed to, I think we're approaching 200,000 here in the United States. So every contradiction, everything wrong with the country, everything from anti-Black racism to predatory capitalism, is all coming to a head in 2020, and then we have this presidential election coming up, which is also problematic.
Yeah, and you know, and you know, the neo-Dickensian and the ultra shock doctrine that all over the world, the capitalist system is unleashing on people is truly stunning. Truly stunning. That even, I mean, it's one thing, all of the governments of the world failing to combat climate change, which is another issue for another day. But even something like coronavirus, and I know that there are some people who say that it's a hoax. I'm not going to get into that, but you have this highly infectious, disease, and you're having, the powers to be saying that, don't go to ball games and don't go to concerts, and everybody really practice social distancing and only see 5 people, and and all this stuff, and yet they're still saying to them, go to work.
Oh, sure. The goal is to get
to go to work. All of you people at school, go to school. Don't even do any homeschooling at home. And you mentioned the shock doctrine, the austerity that the powers to be have been unleashing, and even in Europe too. Is remarkable that even with this highly infectious disease, even that they can't even say, okay, we're going to suspend the stupid rules of capitalism. Even that they say, shut up, suck up, go to work, and if you die, hey, whatever. But of course, in the U.S., it's even worse because of the privatized healthcare system. In Britain, the healthcare system has been privatized, and similar things.
Well, the drive to open businesses, the drive to open schools is tied to the drive to get people back to work. So you have people who can't get back to work if their kids can't go back to school. So they're reopening colleges and universities. Some have reopened and have closed right away because the COVID is spreading. Some school districts here in New York City, they are determined to open the schools. They delayed opening by a couple of weeks, so kids are not going back until next week, I think the 21st of September. But there are teachers afraid to go back. There are parents who are afraid to send their kids to school. There are parents who need their kids to be in school so they can go back to work. But all of it is about getting people back to work so that the engine can keep on running. I mentioned China because that is the country where we're first aware of this disease, but they conquered it. It's a wrap. They had very few deaths. Their command economy, their socialist economy allowed them to build. They built in Wuhan, where it first appeared. They built hospitals just for COVID patients, and they did it in like 10 days because they have a culture of solidarity. People did not fight against the effort to keep them safe because they have a public health system. They were able to treat people right away. They were able to do the contact tracing, able to test people, all of the things that you needed to do in order to subdue this disease. And they did it. Meanwhile, in the United States, people are arguing about whether or not to wear a mask or not wear a mask. It doesn't help you. Yes, it does help you. You're just a sheep if you go along. It doesn't kill many people.
You're up too. There's been lots of people doing those protests, and even outlets I like and respect tremendously, where I go to get my news and to prepare for interviews like this. Even some of the outlets, which I'm not going to name, but even some of the outlets I like have also been engaging in coronavirus denialism, and I just want to say before we get into specific things about the people power movement and some of the issues we're having with our own lefties, is that I'm willing to accept that that coronavirus may not have come from an animal, from the horrible animal trade. I'm willing to flirt with that theory that the powers to be cooked it up in the lab to weaponize more shock doctrine and to do more very reactionary capitalist stuff. I'm willing to flirt with with that. I mean, John Pilger said that the government of England actually did lots of planning in the event a pandemic such as this was to come was to come out, and instead of doing what they should do, they said more privatization. And I think Whitney Webb has also done some pretty good investigation into that. Okay, so that aside, I'm willing to flirt with the idea that this was man-made, blah 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 blah. That said, a lot of the people who that said, I stop when people say that this is all an entire hoax. And that wearing hospital masks is akin to affront on our civil liberties. Although I do know that the powers to be are weaponizing COVID to suspend civil liberties. But that being said, this is a disease. It is happening, and I think you said it best. You may not believe in Rona, but Rona believes in you.
Thank you for that. Yes, that's what we call. That's a nickname, Rona, for short for Corona here in the U.S. But I find it. I don't think it's helpful really to spend a lot of time trying to figure out how it began. Did it occur in nature? Was it man-made? I don't think that's a good use of time, frankly, or mental energy. I think our energy should be spent on looking at the response and how our country fell short. The U.S. is a failed state, and coronavirus proves it. We have a country that couldn't even, all this blaming China. China's the one producing the PPE, the personal protective equipment. China's the one making masks. China's the one who's making, as usual, the scrubs that medical professionals have to wear. So that is ridiculous. I do think it only feeds into this when, for example, YouTube, if you talk about coronavirus, they can remove your video. Facebook, if you put the words coronavirus in a post, you get this little message. Are you sure you're not spreading misinformation? That is horrible. Let everybody say whatever the hell they want to say. I don't really care. If there's some quack on YouTube, then there's somebody else who knows what they're talking about who can go on YouTube. And when you take the quack off, that just spreads this this desire some people have to scare themselves. I believe that's part of it. But people are looking in the wrong direction. I think we should just look at the countries with the lowest death rates are the countries that are either socialist or have very robust public health care systems. That's where the death toll has been less, and that is what we need to focus on.
And that is a perfect segue because we were talking about the very unjust system that is capitalism. I mean, forget liberal capitalism, corporatocracy, crony capitalism. Capitalism. It is this system that even produces, all those animals in these awful conditions, which lead to these highly infectious disease. And it is capitalism and this stupid mindset that you can't give people universal basic income and have a proper welfare state to look after people during a pandemic, that people just have to, go to work, go to school, and if they get sick, okay, tough, tough shit for them. But but that's going to be a So that's going to be a conversation. But that's going to be a conversation for another day. But we'll probably go back into it. But I wanted to talk about, going back to police brutality and the police who are enforcers of this racist, classist system. Because because I was listening to the Green Party of Canada, and I'm following the debates there, because our comrade Dmitry Lascaris is trying to run for the leadership, and they got into the issue of whether to defund the police or not. And Miriam, and there's long been this quiet abolitionist movement of people who say that we should abolish prisons, we should abolish the police. There's no reforming this institution. So what's your response to one of the candidates, Miriam Haddad, who said that the RCMP, the police of Canada, were created to be the racist thugs that they are? So what's your response to abolishing the police, or to people such as myself and one of the other Green Party candidates of Canada, Annamie Paul, who was saying that yes, we do need to hold the police into account when they murder Indigenous people, when they murder Black people, when they murder unarmed people, but no amount of socialist policies and socialist reforms will stop, murderers, rapists, and pedophiles. So therefore, the police are a necessary evil.
Well, the people who, here in the United States, half the people in prison, and we have the largest prison population of any country on earth, and that must always be remembered when the U.S. tries to lecture anybody about human rights. Half the people have not committed violent crimes. It's mostly drug offenses and minor crimes. People are, the law enforcement targets certain communities, targets Black communities, for example, and people go to jail for little or nothing. And then they are sort of imprisoned forever. So you go to jail for something minor that you probably shouldn't go to jail for. There are whole categories of jobs you can never get. You're still under the supervision of the law enforcement system. So let's say you get parole. You have to report to your parole officer. You can't even leave town without their permission. You can't associate with anybody who has committed a felony. And because they create this system where there are a lot of people who are declared felons, that means just about anyone. There are places you cannot live. You cannot live in public housing, meaning you can't even live with your own family in some cases. So this is half the people in prison are Black. And we're 13% of the population, but half the prisoners. So this, and the police feed into the system, and the district attorneys, the prosecutors feed into the system. That's their job. That's why they don't want to prosecute cops. They work together. So this entire system obviously needs to be torn up. But how do you do that? There are people advocating for, I'm opposed to the proposals to defund the police. I'll tell you why. First, several reasons. First of all, it's too easy for them to use budgetary tricks to make it appear that they are giving less money to police departments when they are not. And I know the goal is a worthy one, to take money away from the police and actually use it to help people. I understand that. But for example, here in New York City, the mayor claimed to have taken money away from the NYPD. But really, all they did is switch budgetary lines. For example, so there were school security guards, and they were paid for, they were in the NYPD budget. So the mayor just moved them out of the NYPD budget and put them in the Department of Education instead of, so they're paid by the DOE and not the NYPD. And he says, well, look, we defunded the police. They haven't changed anything about policing. Nothing about policing in New York City has changed. People aren't now, the police are, being the entitled babies that they are. They have responded by not responding. So people have legitimate calls and they don't show up. So if there are fewer arrests, it's only because the police union, which endorsed Donald Trump, by the way, has told their members to stand down. But there has not been a discussion about how do you provide protection for the community. And I argue that most of what police do is a lot of nuisance stuff that could be done otherwise.
Yeah.
People have been killed because the man excuse me, who I referred to in upstate New York, he was having a psychotic incident. There was no reason for police to be involved at all. There could have been trained medical people, psychiatric workers, somebody else to try to address that situation. So we don't need the police to show up when someone has a psychiatric illness or to respond to fender benders, to any number of small things that you don't need the police for. But basically for Black people, they are the modern day slave patrol. They police us. We are over policed. We need community control of the police. The community needs the right to decide what the police do and don't do, decide who to hire, who to fire, who to prosecute. But in order to have that, you need to have a system which allows the public to have input into how government runs. So that's part of a much larger discussion, but I think it's worth having. So I say we need to work for community control of the police and not defunding the police. It's too problematic. I think the defunding will happen as a result of the community control, and public resources will be spent where they should be. Also, this defunding and abolishing is phony. Minneapolis, Minnesota is the city where George Floyd was killed, and the city council voted to get rid of the police department. Well, to follow up, all they're getting is a name change. They're just going to change the name. But the mayor said no, and it's not going to be on the ballot after all. So nothing's happened. Nothing has changed in Minnesota. In Minneapolis, Minnesota, the same conditions that allowed George Floyd to be killed are still in existence. So that is my take on the police. But it's
so are you still of the opinion, which I kinda have, although I'm starting. Yeah. So are you of the opinion that even though the police are institutionally racist, that they were founded to be the racist, classist thugs that they were towards indigenous, Blacks, Latinos, immigrant communities, legal or otherwise, but are you of the opinion that the police are still a necessary evil when it comes to, murders, rapes, and stuff like that?
Yes, but that's actually the minority of the crimes committed. The crime rate has been dropping in this country in recent years. So obviously, yes, I want murders to be investigated, but you usually call the police after that's happened, and so.
Funny. Yeah, funny. I actually never thought of it like that.
Hopefully catch people. I don't know what their rate of apprehension is. And we also have this system which very often innocent people or draconian sentences for minor crimes are the rule in this country. So those are all the things that need to be talked about. So yes, the emphasis should be on violent crime. But that means you need smaller police departments. They don't need guns. You need fewer of them. But all of that that's part of much larger discussions. But it has to start with bringing up these issues. That's how it begins.
Well, then, two things because no, we still have some time. Looking at the clock, but then, thank you for that response. I think one of these days we're definitely going to have an entire show, devoted to, devoted to that aspect of, of racial justice and social justice. Then I want you to respond to this that some people say about how to reform the police. What's your response that if the police themselves were paid more and actually kind of like the military that they that they have access to health, education by joining the police, because they're there to protect and serve. Do you think that if you paid the police more, that would stop all the police corruption and all the police brutality?
No. First of all, there are places here in New York, the police are very well paid. Very well paid. They make a lot more than the average person. They're able to retire with full benefits after 20 years. So they are retired in their early 40s. So they've got it very good. So there may be low-paid police in other parts of the country, but there are many police departments where they are paid very, very well. A lot of them with overtime, they make six figures. There are cops who make $100,000 a year. I think after 5 years, they all make $60,000 or something for, which is unusual now for younger people to have that kind of income. So they're doing just fine. They have very strong unions. They get lots of benefits most other workers don't get. Here in New York City, for example, if a police officer develops heart disease, it is assumed to be work-related, and regardless of how young they are, they can retire with full benefits. So that's the kind of stuff that they get. It's very difficult to fire them. The cop who killed Eric Garner, the man who famously, his last words were, "I can't breathe." It took them 5 years to fire him. He actually got a raise when he was going to court because every time he went to court, he got paid overtime. So they're doing very well. That's not an argument that I think is at all valid.
Now, Hillary Clinton once said when she was talking about how to stop all this epidemic of state murder, of police brutality, and she was saying that why don't we have stricter stricter gun controls so that the police don't always feel that they have to be on edge, and them having this this mentality that everyone has a gun, so therefore they shoot.
They shoot people because that's what they want to do, and they shoot Black people especially because that's what they want to do. They hate and or fear Black people, and that's why it happens. I'm in favor of gun control laws, by the way, but that's not the answer.
I'm even for repealing the Second Amendment.
Well, I am too. It's we need some more constitutional amendments. That's why they shoot people, because they want to, and because the state gives them the right, and because they do it with impunity. So that's why it happens. They're on edge with Black people because they just don't like Black people. There's a few years ago, a man was shot. Fortunately, he lived. It's a weird story. He worked in a home for children with special needs, and one of the kids who was autistic managed to leave. He went after him. Somebody called the police, and he literally laid down on the street, raised his hands, and cop shot him anyway. And he asked the cop, "Why'd you shoot me?" And the cop said, "I don't know." And I think it was actually an honest answer. I think he was just on autopilot about being violent against Black people. So it's that kind of thing. So I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear from Hillary Clinton for any reason.
but lots of people, even well-meaning lefties, say that if we had more gun control, then the police will be less on edge and always shooting questions and asking questions later.
No, they shoot people
They,
who
they,
aren't
either,
armed.
they either say that or they say that the police should be paid more, and that way they won't be prone to police corruption and police brutality.
Sure, they would. They still would. I mean, the issue is to have laws, and as far as them, uh, we need more gun control. There are too many guns in this country. But now you have more people in the wake of the election. There are a record number of people buying guns, many of them first-time gun owners. And it's something that just feeds on itself. So the Trumpers, they run around with guns. So black people are afraid. They think, I need to have a gun. I know people who never talked about having a gun who suddenly want to own one. I think that's very dangerous myself. If I feel the need to own a firearm, I'm out. I'm going to go live somewhere else. That's all I can say. But that's the history of the United States, the history of genocide of indigenous people, chattel slavery. All of that has led to having a country, even now, centuries later, where people are more prone to violence, and the state upholds them. And it starts at the top. So the U.S. government gets to kill people abroad. So you're not, and that's the other thing. We have to include a conversation about foreign policy. You're not going to have a country that is just here, that has justice here, when the United States claims a right to do anything it wants in the rest of the world, to have 800 foreign military bases, to have the U.S. Africa Command, AFRICOM. Most people don't know this, but the U.S. government has decided that it can control different sectors of the world. So there's a NORTHCOM and a SOUTHCOM and a CENTCOM and an INDOPACCOM and a EUROCOM and an AFRICOM. We just celebrated commemorated the anniversary of September 11th. And after that terror attack, the war on terror, so-called, it was a war of terror, the United States against the rest of the world. And a study showed that at least, by a conservative number, at least 37 million people have been displaced by U.S. aggression since September 11th, 2001. So that's everywhere from Libya to Syria to Afghanistan to Iraq. 37 million people at least. And that's not even totaling the dead. It's just people who are become refugees as a result of U.S. actions. You can't have a country that allows that. You can't have a country where almost 60% of discretionary spending is Defense Department spending and have a just country. It's the reason we literally cannot have nice things. You cannot provide for people's medical care if 60% of the budget is for military spending. And Joe Biden, who's supposed to be this wonderful counterweight to Trump, he just said a couple years ago he's going to ask for an increase in defense spending, and he'll never take
Margaret
out of.
At least says that. But Margaret, Joe Biden at least says that the police should not be shooting people; they should be shooting people in the legs.
Yeah, it's very distressing, this presidential election. I'm a member of the Green Party. I'll be voting for the Green Party candidates, Hawkins and Walker. I'm not going to vote for more war, so I can't vote for Democrats any more than I can vote for Trump. But the Democrats, I believe, there's a good chance that Trump can win again. The people who voted for him the first time still like him. They'll vote for him again. There's been more voter suppression, which Democrats don't deal with. They have picked the worst candidate they possibly could have in Joe Biden. He has some sort of cognitive problem. They're afraid for him to be seen. I won't be surprised if they find a way to cancel the debates. Trump is still having his rallies. Biden has not had a rally. How do you run for president and you don't have a large public event? They're using COVID as their excuse. I don't trust the polls. I should not have trusted them in 2016. So I believe Trump can win again. I really do. But a Biden victory creates different problems. There's nothing about Joe Biden winning that makes me feel better. It's better to have a Democrat making federal judicial nominations, but that's it. That's all I can think of. But I think we have to learn to rely on ourselves, to organize, to be activists, and everybody wants to fetishize the civil rights movement without talking about what it is that people did during that time. They constantly made demands. They acted in mass. They did it over a period of years. They didn't care what politicians thought of their demands. They knew politicians did not want to meet their demands, but because they persisted and saw politicians in an adversarial light, because they did all of those things, that is why we had positive change in this country. And that's the only thing that can help us now that capitalism is in crisis. And that creates this domino effect of people already living precariously, but then you have a COVID-19, but you live in a failed state, so it can't even respond to COVID-19. So then people's lives are adversely affected even more.
Okay. Well, we're just out of time. I'm not going to talk about the ridiculous conversation about cancel culture, which Professor Noam Chomsky has decided that this is a big issue we need to wage on during the middle of all this, people power protests and and unrest. So I'm not going to touch that, but
I'll talk since you brought it up. It's the left that's canceled, so-called. Social media clamps down on the left. The Russiagate fraud. Someday I'll come back and we'll just talk about Russiagate. All of that has been used to crush dissent, to uplift the official narratives, to silence the left. We're the ones who get kicked off of Twitter, who get kicked off of Facebook. So those people writing that open letter, I wish they had talked about who really gets canceled. And not worry about somebody being, criticized on social media as if that.
And most of those establishment, I'll say it, establishment douchebags that are whining about cancel culture just because Steven Pinker got canceled one time. They're not talking about the suppression of Whitney Webb on the internet. They're not talking about freeing Julian Assange, and they're
nothing about Julian Assange. Talk about a show trial. This man, the U.S. government, claims a right to snatch up anybody anywhere on the planet who he revealed war crimes. That's what this is about. And after years of propaganda against him, the Russiagate fraud being used against him, they have made sure that he gets very little support. The British government, being a vassal state of the U.S., is going along with this. What is the term? Why am I'm talking about? My brain is canceled.
Yeah, the kind of
extradition. Yeah. That's the word I was looking for. Where he will be on trial, facing many years in prison in the Eastern District of Virginia, where nobody is ever found innocent. That is the first surveillance state court, and that's what awaits Assange.
And we need and the last thing I'll just say is we need a revolution. It's not going to happen with Joe Biden. Shame on all of those lefties that threw Julian Assange under the bus. Shame on all those lefties that supported the Syrian wars. And people have the right to vote for Joe Biden, but nothing's going to change from him. And as Malcolm X said, you're not only being a chump, but you're being a traitor. And this is Cindy Sheehan saying this to the human race.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I agree, 100%.
All righty. Well, on that note, folks, I'm sorry that we have to cut this short, but Margaret has another appointment which needs to get into. So, Margaret, thank you so much for coming back on 1+1. Always an honor to have you on, and I look forward to the next time we can organize an interview.
Thank you so much, Youri. Thank you.
Ciao, ciao.